Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that feels, I don't know, a little bit like magic and a little bit like a scam, depending on who you ask.
Chuckles.
That's a good way to put it.
We're talking about the future. Specifically, whether we, you, me, the person on TV shouting about the stock market are actually any good at predicting what's going to happen.
It's the ultimate human obsession, isn't it? We just crave certainty. We want to know if that stock is going to the moon or if the polls are finally right this time.
And we usually just go with our gut, or maybe worse, we listen to the experts.
Yeah.
But the book we're diving into today, it suggests that's a really terrible strategy.
Yeah, it really does.
We are looking at Superforecasting, The Art and Science of Prediction by Philip E. Tetlock and Dan Gardner. And I have to say, the opening premise of this book is kind of a slap in the face to the entire expert industry.
Oh, a huge one. Tetlock does not pull any punches. He basically starts by dismantling this whole idea that a fancy title or a PhD makes you a prophet. Right, he brings up this study that's become legendary, the dart-throwing chimpanzee.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard this referenced a million times, usually to make fun of economists. But what did the study actually find? Because, I mean, surely a geopolitical expert knows more than a monkey.
Well, that's the trap right there. You have to distinguish between knowing things and predicting things.
Okay.
So back in the 80s and 90s, Tetlock ran this massive project. He gathered something like 28,000 predictions from almost 300 experts.
Wow.
Yeah, these are people who commented on politics and the economy for a living.
Yeah.
And he asked them specific things, like, will this country go to war?
And the results.
When he checked the accuracy years later, the average expert performed about as well as random guessing.
You're kidding.
That's where the chimp analogy comes from. If you just had a chimp throw a dart at a board with the options on it, the chimp would have pretty much tied with the experts.
That's just wild. But wait, so are you saying knowledge is useless? That
Not-
a professor of Middle Eastern studies knows less than I do?
No, and that's a really important nuance. They know more history. They know the players, the culture. They can explain why something happened yesterday perfectly.
But not tomorrow.
But that knowledge didn't translate into predicting what would happen tomorrow. In fact, Tetlock found this weird inverse thing where the more famous the expert was.
More likely to be on TV.
Exactly. The worse their predictions often were.
How does that even make sense? You'd think the best people would get the most airtime.
But think about what makes good TV. You want someone bold, confident. You want the person who says, the market will definitely crash.
Right. Not the person who says, well, there's a 55% chance of a correction, but it depends on these 12 variables.
It's boring. Confidence sells. But in forecasting, confidence is often, a sign of incompetence.
The book calls this the illusion of validity. We mistake confidence for accuracy.
Exactly. And the experts often protect themselves by using really vague language. There's a great example in the book with Steve Ballmer, the former CEO of Microsoft.
Well, the iPhone prediction?
Yeah.
Yes. Set the scene.
So it's 2007. The iPhone is just launching. Ballmer is asked about it, and he just laughs. He says, there's no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. No chance.
No chance. Famous last words. But obviously he was wrong. Why is that example so important to Tetlock?
It's not just that he was wrong. That's that word significant. What does significant market share even mean?
I guess.
A lot.
Right. But is that 5%? Is it 20%? If the iPhone got 3% of the global market but made 50% of the industry's profits, Ballmer could still say, well, 3% isn't significant volume, so I was right.
Ah, I see. He left himself an escape hatch.
We all do it. It might rain, or the meeting will probably go well.
Tetlock says if you really want to get better, you have to strip that vagueness away. You need numbers, you need dates, you have to keep score.
No more weasel words. Okay, but then the book shifts gears in a way I did not expect. It goes from tech CEOs to medicine, and this story about Archie Cochrane was really unsettling.
Cochrane is a fascinating guy. He's basically the reason we have evidence-based medicine today.
Yeah.
But this story is about his own brush with what he thought was death.
He found a lump, right?
He did. He's a doctor himself, but he finds a lump under his arm, goes to a top specialist. The specialist feels it and just immediately says, it's cancer. We need to operate.
Just like that. No biopsy, no tests.
Nope. The specialist was running on expert intuition. He'd seen hundreds of cancer cases. He knew what it felt like. He was completely certain.
That sounds terrifyingly like the pundits we were just talking about. I know this for a fact.
It's the exact same psychological machine. It's what Daniel Kahneman calls System 1 thinking. It's your gut. It's fast, automatic, emotional.
But Cochrane, he pushed back.
He did. He was a skeptic. He demanded a biopsy. The specialist was actually offended, like, how dare you question my experience?
Wow.
But he had the biopsy, and it turned out it wasn't cancer, just a weird swelling.
Yeah.
If he'd listened to the confident expert, he would have been mutilated for no reason.
So the lesson is bigger than just doctors make mistakes. It's about how we think.
Right. To be a good forecaster, you have to kind of suppress that system 1 gut reaction and then engage system 2, which is slow, analytical, and honestly, it's exhausting.
You have to force yourself to doubt.
Doubt is the engine of accuracy.
And that leads us to the core experiment of the book. The government basically said, okay, if the experts are chimps, can we find people who are actually good at this?
Enter the Good Judgment Project.
Right.
This was a huge tournament sponsored by IRRPA, the intelligence community's research arm. They recruited thousands of regular people volunteers and asked them to predict incredibly specific things.
Like, will Greece leave the Eurozone by December 2012? Stuff like that.
Exactly. No wiggle room. And you had to assign a probability. You couldn't just say yes. You had to say, I am 70% confident. And then they were scored on it.
And this is where the superforecasters came from. Who were these people? I'm picturing like a room full of MIT quants and retired spies.
That's what's so amazing. They were. Well, they were just regular people. One of the stars was a guy named Bill Flack,
The irrigation
a
worker.
retired irrigation worker from Nebraska. His job was water timers. Another was a pharmacist. Another was a filmmaker. They didn't have access to classified intel. They were just reading Google News like the rest of us.
But they didn't just do okay. They crushed it.
Oh, they destroyed the competition. The top 2% of these volunteers, the superforecasters, performed about 30% better than actual intelligence officers who had access to secret data.
That is just embarrassing for the spies.
It is. But it proves the book's point. It's not what you know, it's how you think.
So let's get into that. Let's break down how they think. Tetlock uses this big metaphor of the fox and the hedgehog.
The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing.
What does that mean in this context?
The experts who fail, the ones on TV, they're almost always hedgehogs. They have one big idea, one lens they see the whole world through.
Like the free market solves everything, or America is an empire in decline.
Exactly. And every piece of news they see, they cram it into that single story. If the market goes up, the decline hedgehog says it's a bubble. If it goes down, see, I told you, they can never be wrong.
Okay, so what's a fox?
Foxes are the super forecasters. They don't have a grand theory. They know lots of little things. They're eclectic. They look at a problem from multiple angles. And most importantly, they're willing to change their minds when the facts change.
That sounds great, but I want to get practical. The book gives us their toolkit, and one of the techniques is called Fermiizing.
Yeah, after Enrico Fermi, the physicist.
So there's this classic problem. How many piano tuners are there in Chicago? And my immediate reaction, my system 1, is just to panic and go, 1,000, I have no idea.
Right, you either freeze or you pull a number out of thin air. A super forecaster doesn't guess the answer. They break the problem down into pieces they can estimate.
Okay, walk me through it. Let's solve the piano tuner problem right now.
Okay, so first, don't think about tuners. How many people live in Chicago?
Around 3 million, I think.
Okay, good enough. How many households is that? Let's say maybe 2 or 3 people per house.
So roughly 1 million households.
Perfect. Now, what percentage of those households do you think owns a piano?
It's not that common anymore. I don't know, maybe 1 or 2%.
Let's go to 2%. So it's 20,000 pianos in Chicago. How often do you tune a piano?
Once a year, maybe.
Sounds right. So Chicago needs 20,000 tunings a year. Last step. How many pianos can one full-time tuner do in a year?
I mean, if they have to travel, maybe 2 a day. So 10 a week, let's say 500 a year.
Okay. So you've got 20,000 tunings needed, and one tuner does 500. You just do the math. 20,000 divided by 500 is
40?
There are probably around 40 piano tuners in Chicago.
That feels shockingly specific. Is it right?
When Fermi did it, the actual answer was something like 45. He got there not by knowing, but by breaking it down into knowable chunks. And super forecasters do this for everything.
That leads to the next technique, which I think is maybe the most powerful one for regular life. The outside view versus the inside view.
Yes. This is the one that cures that expert intuition blindness we talked about.
Let's use the case study from the book, The Death of Yasser Arafat. It plays out like a detective story.
Right. So Arafat dies in 2004. Years later, they find traces of polonium-210 on his clothes. So the question for the forecasters was, will a French investigation officially find that Arafat was poisoned?
Okay, so if I'm looking at this, my gut reaction is he had tons of enemies. Polonium was found on his stuff. He looked really sick. It has to be poison, right? The story just fits perfectly.
That's the inside view. You're looking at all the juicy, specific details of this one case. A superforecaster stops and says, wait, ignore Arafat for a second, step back.
To the outside view, so what is that here?
The outside view asks the boring statistical question. How often are political leaders assassinated with polonium?
Almost never. I can only think of one other case, that Russian spy Litvinenko.
Exactly. It's incredibly rare. The base rate is practically zero, so you start your prediction really, really low.
Like at 1% or something.
Maybe a little higher because he's a high-profile target, but yeah, you start low. Then you can start looking at the inside view, the enemies, the toothbrush, to adjust that number up a little bit. But you're anchored to that low base rate.
You don't get carried away by the drama.
You don't. And the superforecasters gave it a low probability, maybe 20%. The pundits were all screaming, assassination. In the end, the French concluded the evidence was inconclusive. The forecasters won because they started with the boring stats.
This feels like something I should do when I'm, say, buying a house.
Oh, absolutely. The inside view is walking into the open house, smelling the fresh baked cookies and seeing the new kitchen and just falling in love.
This is the one. It's perfect.
That's the story. The outside view is ignoring the cookies and asking, what is the average price per square foot in the zip code? What's the average cost of repairs for a house this old?
And that number is usually a lot less romantic.
It is, but it stops you from making a huge mistake.
I want to touch on one more big topic before we wrap up. The book dissects the 2003 Iraq War intelligence failure. The belief that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction.
This is the big cautionary tale about consensus.
Because at the time, basically the entire U.S. intelligence community agreed. They said, high confidence. How did so many smart people get it so spectacularly wrong?
It wasn't stupidity. It was a failure of process. Tetlock makes the point that when everyone in a room agrees, people stop checking for blind spots. You just assume someone else checked.
And if you're the one person who disagrees, you look like a troublemaker.
Exactly, there's social pressure. But super forecasting teams were encouraged to do the opposite. They used what he calls dragonfly eye thinking.
A dragonfly has thousands of lenses in its eye.
So it sees one image from thousands of perspectives. Super forecasters actively hunt for the counterargument. In the Iraq case, one of them would have been forced to ask, okay, we see trucks moving, that looks like a weapons program, but is there any other possible reason Saddam would be moving those trucks around?
Like maybe he's bluffing to make his enemies think he's strong.
Yes, maybe he's bluffing to deter Iran. A super forecaster would assign a probability to that bluff theory. The intelligence community effectively gave it a 0% chance.
So if everyone agrees, panic.
Or at least, if everyone agrees, appoint a designated dissenter.
I have to ask the skeptics question, though. We've been praising these super forecasters, but couldn't they have just gotten lucky?
That's the regression to the mean question. Yeah. And it's a fair one.
Like a baseball player has one amazing season and then is just average forever after.
Right. Luck cancels out over time. And the super forecasters did regress a little bit. That's natural. But, and this is the key proof, they didn't regress all the way back to average. The people who were great in year one were still really, really good in year two and year three.
So it's a skill, not just a lucky guess.
It's a demonstrable, learnable skill.
Okay, let's land this plane. For our listeners who are trying to run a business or just make better life choices, what are the big takeaways? How do we become more like the fox?
I think it comes down to a few core habits. Number one, be a fox, which means check your ego. If you have one big, strong belief about the world, you're basically blinding yourself. You have to actively look for information that proves you wrong.
Which is painful, but necessary. What's two?
Keep score. It's so simple, but nobody does it. When you make a prediction, I think this project will be done by March, write it down with a probability. I'm 80% sure.
And then when March comes, you have to actually look at the paper.
It forces you to be honest with yourself. You'll start to see your own biases. Wow, I'm always way too optimistic.
Okay, what else?
Always start with the outside view. Before you get sucked into the specifics, ask, what usually happens in this type of situation? What's the base rate?
Don't fall in love with the cookies. Check the comps.
Exactly. And finally, update your beliefs. Don't be stubborn. When new information comes in, even small bits, nudge your probability. Small, frequent updates are the key.
It sounds like the secret to predicting the future isn't a crystal ball at all. It's just intellectual humility and a little bit of math.
That's it. It's accepting we can never be 100% certain.
Yeah.
But we can work to be less wrong than we were yesterday.
I want to leave everyone with one final thought to mull over. Our culture just worships confidence. We elect the most confident candidate, we invest with the most confident CEO. But this entire deep dive suggests that the people who actually have a better read on the future are the quiet ones, the careful ones, the ones who are constantly saying, I might be wrong.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Should we be more suspicious of anyone who claims to be 100% certain about, well, anything?
I'd assign a pretty high probability to yes.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.